It's peaceful here. I tried to live a normal life. And they had guns pointing at us, just like you're pointing the cameras. Like they're going to fight to the bitter end. You know, life goes on, and as I say, you can't dwell on the past. I think when the chips are down, religion is very important. The high holiday music, it's just kind of tore into my heart. I'm one of the few survivors, actually. I met my husband in the Adirondacks, and we married in '58. I was 23 when I got married, and I guess in those days you don't think, you know, you have a family, but as I said, you try to protect and shelter your children from hurt. And maybe, you know, I didn't want to talk to the children about it because it was a way of protecting them. I didn't want them to be sad and hurt. The hardest thing is not having the family. That was the hardest thing. And for my children, not to have grandparents, not to have aunts and uncles and cousins. That was the hardest thing. It took me 50 years to talk about my experiences. I didn't even want to talk to my children or my husband. Nobody knew really my background. You just kind of like you get numb to it, you know. And as I said, it was emotional. That's why I couldn't talk about it, because I know other people that have survived the Holocaust, and they have a hard time coping with it. I did social work for 23 years. I think social workers seem to be drawn to taking care of people. You know, it's a substitute for to compensate for what I didn't have. When the war broke out in September of 1939, I lived with my mother, my father. I had 2 older brothers, and I had 3 older sisters and 1 younger sister. There were 7 children in the family. I lived in a village that was about 10 miles from Warsaw. We were more fortunate than some of the other people because my mother had a brother that lived in the Warsaw ghetto. We were able to stay with my uncle and his family, and there was 9 of us. Now, food was very scarce. We were hungry all the time. When we had a piece of bread, that was a treat. I was at the time then, I was about 6. There was a woman that lived in our village, and she was able to come into the ghetto so she could bring food. And people gave her whatever they could you know, if they had any jewels or if they had any furs. I think when your stomach is empty, you don't care about anything else. That's the most important thing. Stasia asked my mother if I could go back with her to Okunev. And I still remember my mother standing by the window and saying, "Go. I know that all of us are going to be killed, and at least you're the only one that will survive." So I went, and Stasia took me out as her own child. So on 2 occasions, I went back with Stasia to the Warsaw Ghetto. When Stasia and I tried to get back for the 3rd time, we couldn't get in. We went back to Okunev, and I could see the ghetto, the fires burning, and that was the last time that I had any contact with my family. The Gestapo and the police found out where I was, and they came to my family's house in Poland, in Okunev, and they knocked on the door. There was a window that was going out to a cornfield, so they pushed me out the window. So I was hiding in the cornfields for about 2 or 3 days. I was very scared. I was always scared of the dark. One day, they had an air raid. We ran down to the cellar and we're hiding. And all of a sudden, we see 2 Germans with dogs appear at the entrance of the cellar, and they said, "Come, come." So they took everybody out. And they took us to a place where, again, they separated the men from the women. One of the German officers came over. He was trying to be nice, and he said, "You know," he said, "I have a family back at home too," and he's trying to be nice and console us. Anyhow, just as they were getting ready to kill us, an officer rode up on a horse, and he said, "Halt." They stopped the killing, the shooting of the women and the children. Before they took us to the concentration camp, we had to go through checkpoints with the doctors. And the Polish doctors painted us with yellow chalk, and they told the Germans that we had jaundice. So the Germans didn't want us because they were afraid that we would infect the others, so they let us go. I knew that I had an uncle in Paris, and I started corresponding with my uncle, and my uncle told me that he was going to try and get papers to bring me to Paris. So I stayed with my uncle and his common-law wife. At the time, I think I didn't mention, when I lived with Vanda, I became Catholic. I was very good Catholic. I wasn't Jewish at the time, but I knew this was a Jewish family. But I wanted to go to church, and they said, and his wife said, "No, you can't live in this house if you're going to go to church." So I ran away. And I went to a Polish boarding school where I could go to church. And when they took me to temple, I knew deep down that, you know, I couldn't practice Catholicism anymore. That for the respect of my parents and grandparents, that I couldn't do that. After a while, religion is more like a way of life, you know. the way you live, rather than, you know, going to church or synagogue on a regular basis. It's interesting, when we were going back home from the synagogue with my granddaughter and her little friend, and she says, "Grandma, were you ever bas mitzvah?" And I said, "No, honey." I said, during the war, you know, I couldn't go to any school or, you know, receive any religious education, so I never was. I don't want to live in the past because it's not productive. As I say, you can't dwell on the past. You can't always predict the future, but you can deal with the now. I'm here, and as I say, I have my family, but I still miss my family. That never goes away.